Okay, I'm going to talk really fast. Today we're going to take our first glimpse into the growing social movement attempting to gain African Americans equal rights, known as civil rights. We're going to look at a specific case today, the Montgomery Bus Boycott. We'll look specifically at what this movement began to do, which showed that African Americans were beginning to openly stand up for their rights in the South. We see the beginning of Martin Luther King coming to the forefront, promoting peaceful protest in the face of injustice, and segregation laws in Alabama began to break down. So, what happened? With the recent passing of the Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, many white Southerners were left angry and bitter towards anti-segregation rules. They held on to the Jim Crow laws very strictly, particularly in states like Alabama and Mississippi. One such segregation rule was bus segregation. This forced, as you see in these pictures, African Americans to be seated in the back of the bus, and whites were allowed to sit in the front of the bus. This was because the exit to the bus was at the front, and therefore to sit at the front of the bus was quicker and easier, as these people were leaving work, wanted to get home and off the bus quicker. On December 5th, 1955, Rosa Parks decided that she did not want to give up her seat for a white passenger. Seamstress and secretary for the NAACP, she was tired. She refused to give up her seat, and as a result was pulled off the bus, arrested, and fined $10, which at the time was a significant charge for a working woman of the South. Now, her arrest put into effect plans to have a boycott on the city buses. The purpose of this boycott was to have a huge impact on the bus industry. Stopping the use of the buses for African Americans would be huge. 75% of the city's bus riders were African American, and that means that the buses would have to go without 75% of their income. Now, this boycott was led by a relatively unknown Baptist minister that supported Gandhi's idea of civil disobedience and peaceful protest. We see here one of his quotes. If you want to stop and pause it, you can, so you can read this more carefully, but his quote is, "We are here because first and foremost we are American citizens, and we are determined to acquire our citizenship to the fullness of its meaning. We are tired of being segregated and humiliated, tired of being kicked about by the brutal feet of oppression." Now, to make this boycott work for over the course of a year, the boycotters hitchhiked to work, they walked to work, rode bikes, got together in carpools and shuttles, as you can see in some of these pictures here, all to avoid using the bus and still get to work. Here's a quote by Martin Luther King from the Martin Luther King Monument in Washington, D.C. "We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." You can see that he had a very nice way of speaking, and that'll come up a little bit more later. Sorry, one second. Now, though some whites supported the boycott, many were angered. Boycott leaders, including King, were arrested, and violence erupted, including a bomb being detonated at Martin Luther King's house. This use of intimidation had been successful in the past for white Southerners, and they were hoping that it would work here. However, ultimately, the city bus company lost thousands of dollars in revenue, and the Supreme Court ruled that Montgomery bus segregation law was unconstitutional. In other words, the Constitution said it was not allowed in this country. Bus segregation equals legal, therefore the bus boycott was over and successful. So what does this mean? It means that progress can be achieved peacefully, even in the face of discrimination, intimidation, and violence. It was the first instance that we're going to see in which Martin Luther King Jr. led these peaceful protests against something that they considered unjust. This is our first video during our project, so you're going to be using this video and the ones that come to help you answer your questions a little bit better. If you need to stop and hit pause, or if you need to stop and go back and listen to this again, freedom is in your hands. All right, that was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I did it. Bada bing.